Crimes with Asian Americans as the target have skyrocketed in the United States. One of the recent examples involved a vicious attack on a 91-year-old Asian American man in Oakland's Chinatown. Now, currently there is a $25,000 reward for anyone who has any information regarding the crime that you're about to see. And I do want to warn you that the video we're about to show you is pretty graphic and terrible. But with that said, this is what we're talking about.
Kind of forward there, you know that.
So you see in the video, some person randomly decides to shove this 91-year-old man onto the ground. Right now, there's very little information about who this person is, but aside from anecdotal evidence, it's important to take a step back and see if there's actually a trend happening regarding crimes with Asian Americans as the target. And the UN actually did a report, an August 2020 UN report, found that there were more than 1,800 racist incidents against Asian Americans in the United States over an 8-week period from March to May of 2020. And that report, by the way, does include several examples of what the UN report is referring to. For instance, in one reported incident, a Japanese American woman walking in Los Angeles, California with her 2-year-old son said a white man rolled down his window and said, "Tell your kid when he grows up that China did all this." And what he was referring to was the pandemic, right? So obviously, I think it's pretty clear now that Donald Trump's rhetoric had an impact on the way that people treat one another. On the other side of the country, at a grocery store outside of Scranton, Pennsylvania, a man yelled, "This pandemic wouldn't have happened if you stayed in your country where you belong," punctuated with a racial slur. Now, believe it or not, our First Amendment protects that kind of speech. That kind of hate speech is protected. But then there were other cases that people are pointing to as hate crimes against Asian Americans. But I think that it's a little difficult to blame it on hate. Authorities are not investigating these cases as hate crimes because there's no indication that they were targeted for the fact that they're Asian Americans. And I'll get into more details on that in just a minute. But Cenk, I wanted you to jump in.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of distinctions here that are important. The ones where they're yelling at folks, it's clearly based on their race. But the ones where they're committing violence, they didn't say anything. So it's harder to know if it was about race. And so Trump riling people up against Asians is super clear, but it's not clear that it was that the violent actions were in any way related to Trump. I want to be clear about that. They did apprehend one of the people who did it. There's at least 4 different cases in Northern California, and that guy happened to be African American. So that's just statistically improbable that he's a Trump supporter. So let's just be fair about where this is coming from. And hate can come from anywhere. In one case, a lady was knocked over and they stole her purse, and so that was likely a property crime. But they should investigate. And it doesn't mean it could still be a hate crime if a black guy did it. It could be a hate crime if anybody did it. So I wouldn't dismiss it out of hand, but I also wouldn't preemptively conclude that it was.
Yeah, and I also think it's important to bring up that there has been, and I'm not into like scaremongering or anything, but the numbers bear it out. There has been an increase in crime overall throughout the country, and gee, I wonder what has led to that. I mean, crime tends to increase when people become desperate, right? And tens of millions of Americans lost their jobs during this pandemic. The federal government has been unbelievably shameful in the way that they've responded to it in terms of providing the relief that Americans need. I'm not justifying these crimes. Please don't, misinterpret what I'm saying. But there is a correlation between, economic instability and an uptick in crime. And so I want to provide some more examples. For instance, Carl Chan, a resident of Oakland's Chinatown, said that he's seen people blaming Chinatown residents for COVID-19 since the start of the pandemic. This is also important though. He also thinks that Asians are often targeted because of the stereotype that they keep a lot of cash on hand in their homes and businesses. And then when you take a step back and look at crime overall, I want to provide evidence for the argument I'm making. A report by the Council on Criminal Justice found homicides have increased sharply in 2020 across 21 US cities with relevant data.
Thanks for watching the Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR, so those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.